One of the two Irish women who had chased an Israeli terrorist away from Ireland recently has now broken her silence. Not only has she justified her action, but also vowed to repeat the same if she spotted any IDF terrorist in her country again. So, what's the story here? In case you didn't watch my earlier video, let's return to my that video about these two Irish women who had chased an Israeli terrorist out of Ireland a few days ago. You can watch that video here. The story was that this chap from Israeli Defense Forces had arrived in Ireland and was enjoying his holiday and meal at an hotel after having butchered many Palestinians in Gaza and even Lebanon. Two Irish women identified this terrorist and decided to confront him. The IDF terrorist in question thought that this was another protest by a couple of disgruntled individuals, as he kept on smirking and laughing off the outrage expressed by these Irish women. However, he soon realized that this was a serious matter when the two women refused to leave the premises. He then accused them of having spat on him and asked people to call the police. It only took two Irish women and their determined protest against the presence of an IDF terrorist in their country for the man to shun his arrogance and play victim himself. While some felt that Irish women shouldn't have spat on this chap, even though his action as a member of a terrorist organization has been despicable, an overwhelming majority of those who reacted to this viral video on social media called these women brave and said there was nothing wrong in their action. They applauded them for standing up to a member of the IDF. They argued that it's not that often you see a member of a dreaded terrorist organization cornered and play victim. The IDF man later reportedly fled to much safer location, Germany, a country that has stood rock solid with Israel as it slaughtered more than 20,000 children and babies in the last 18 months, with more than 200 of them being killed by Israel in the last 48 hours alone. One of these women appeared on a radio program later to defend her action and say that she had zero remorse and would do it again if an IDF terrorist visited Ireland in the future.
I don't understand why there's this obsession with civility when they themselves are not civil.
Because he's
What
okay.
has international law done? What has civility done? My friend who spat, allegedly, we'll say allegedly spat on him, her whole village was bombed by Israel during this genocide.
Yeah.
His unit was responsible for the Lebanese terrorist pager attacks. This is deeply personal.
Gardaí are investigating an incident in which two women confronted a man from Israel in a bar in Dunleary, during which one of the women spat at the man. He says he is a private citizen. He hasn't been in the army. He says he was in Dublin for a conference, speaking with potential clients. The company paid for his trip.
If you watch the video in its entirety, I said, "You're an IDF soldier." And he said, "I am, and I'm proud to be an IDF soldier." So he actually admitted in the present tense that he is a soldier.
We know that you're an IDF soldier from Israel.
Don't mean this in an aggressive way. It's a genuine question. What gives you and your friend the right to be judge and jury? What gives you the right to confront somebody in a restaurant? And what gives your friend the right to spit at someone? I mean, spitting is technically an assault.
I think we should be focusing on what IOF soldiers are doing. I think that's what we should be
I think there's been
on.
plenty of focus on what the Israeli army
We're a
has done
signatory
in
to the
Gaza.
Genocide Convention. I don't understand why we're letting these people into the country when they're very possibly still in the military.
If you had it all over again, would you do exactly the same thing?
I would honestly, because I don't think that people who are in the IOF and who are so proud of that and have no criticism of it deserve to be comfortable in Ireland. And I think like this obsession with being civil is really missing the point. It's the long. How have the rules of law been holding up for Palestine?
Okay.
Listen, look at what Trump and Biden have done, and there's a genocide case ongoing, but we haven't been able to stop the genocide.
While compromised politicians in the West have either remained a mute spectator to the Gaza genocide committed by Israel, the unfolding Holocaust has shaken the collective conscience of many members of ordinary public globally. Their anger against their corrupt and pro-genocide politicians is reflected through regular street protests and sporadic outbursts as seen in Ireland recently. One may argue that those protesting against the slaughtering of innocent people by Israel feels helpless and deeply frustrated by the support that the rogue regime of war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has received in the last 18 months, despite this being the only genocide in the history to be live streamed into people's mobile phones. Such has been a barbarity of Israeli terrorists that even David Lammy, one of the chief backers of Israel, declared this week that the settler colony built on a stolen land of Palestine was in violation of international law, since it blocked the supply of food, water, and medicine into Gaza and cut off electricity for more than 2 million population.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's strong statement that blockading all aid into Gaza, including UK-raised aid, is appalling and unacceptable. So what discussions did he have with G7 colleagues about what can be done about this provocative action during Ramadan? And what consequences are there for what people are saying is a breach of international law?
Well, my honourable friend is right. This is a breach of international law. Israel, quite rightly, must defend its own security. But we find the lack of aid, it's now been 15 days since aid got into Gaza, unacceptable, hugely alarming and very worrying. And we would urge Israel to get back to the amount of trucks that we were seeing going in, way beyond 600, so that Palestinians can get the necessary humanitarian support they need at this time.
Clip. Another member of Keir Starmer's parliamentary team couldn't hide her disgust against Israel on a BBC programme yesterday.
Israel has blatantly violated international law. What the UK needs to do now is hold Israel to account. And we have not just a moral duty, but also a legal duty to do that. And that means a full arms embargo, sanctions like those that we have rightly put on Russia. It means no longer providing diplomatic cover to Israel at the UN. We've got to stand up to the Israeli government and not allow these far-right politicians to do this in the world, or international law ceases to mean anything, and that harms all of us.
Nadia Witom's outbursts assume significance given that she is an MP from Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Starmer has been one of the biggest cheerleaders of Israel's decision to starve millions of Palestinians to death. Then Nadia chose to condemn Israel on the BBC, a media outlet, or shall I say propaganda outlet, which has been routinely providing cover to Israeli war crimes since 7th of October 2023. And she chose a program hosted by someone who had faced widespread condemnation for her support for Israel in the immediate aftermath of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. Joe Coburn had astonishingly blamed a group of pro-Gaza Jewish protesters for making London unsafe for Jews just because they wanted the murder of innocent men, women, and babies by Israel to stop.
Show you these pictures at Liverpool Street Station, a large number, I have to say, I don't know how many, but thousands, in a sit-in at Liverpool Street Station. They're calling for a ceasefire, but many in the Jewish community, or the Jewish community maybe as a whole, feels very intimidated by this sort of crowd chanting ceasefire, or in other marches, Free Palestine. Do they go too far?
Nadia is not the only Labour MP getting disgusted by Israeli atrocities. Even Emily Thornberry, the Labour MP who defended Israel's right to kill innocent Palestinian people, has now started to call out the settler colonies' lies.
Emily, firstly, what are your thoughts on the interview and what is happening in Gaza?
So I think that what the ambassador was failing to acknowledge is that the deal that was agreed was one that many people in the international community, including President Biden, felt was ready to go last summer. And first of all, there were grave doubts as to why it had taken so long for it to be implemented in January. It could have happened much earlier. Biden said that, and the rest of the community feel the same. And it happens in phases. And as you were trying to say, you know, phase one is a kind of almost like the easy bit. You know, you release hostages and we will release prisoners and there will be a ceasefire. And then we move to phase two. And phase two is Israeli withdrawal, but still more hostages and more prisoners being released. And, you know, and also negotiations beginning for what will be the long-term future for Gaza. Now, what happened was that we got to the 1st of March and the Israelis unilaterally, as far as I can see, said, we're not going into phase two. We want to just stay on phase one. We want to just keep having more hostages and releasing prisoners. We're not prepared to talk about moving out of Gaza, nor are we prepared to talk about a future for Gaza. And the reason for that is because Netanyahu is clinging on to power by his fingernails. He has to pass a budget at the end of March, and he has to pass that budget in order to continue the government that he's in charge of. And if he isn't in charge of the government in Israel, he personally gets into a great deal of trouble. There are court cases swirling around him, there are inquiries and everything else. So what he wants to do is he wants to extend that period as long as he can, and so that he can keep in power. He then begins the bombing. I'm sorry to be quite as brutal as this, but I really can't see any other explanation for this. He begins the bombing. Ben-Gvir, who's pulled out of his government, comes back into the government again, so helping to shore up the government, helping to get his budget through. And in the meantime, 300 plus Palestinians are killed. And the war aims are not clear as to what it is that they're doing. Who is it that they're going after? They say they're still going after Hamas after all this time. But how is it, if they're going after Hamas in a way which is proportionate, that we get so many civilians that are killed? And that is the problem. And that is the problem the Israeli ambassador has when it comes to answering this.
Meanwhile, Israel have killed 100 more innocent people in Gaza using American bombs and with the support of the wider West. Now you try and judge these two Irish women again. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism at buymecoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. The details are there in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.